Hi, I am Jonathan Lyons, author of the book Comedy for Animators. Before Charlie Chaplin, Keystone actors tried to move as much as possible. Sometimes they are just all elbows and knees. One of the ways Charlie changed all that was to focus on individual parts of his body. Let's start at the top with his head. In this scene from The Fireman, all of Charlie's acting is from the neck up. The way he hangs his head, the violent shaking that makes his neck look like rubber. And all of it will get sympathy from the pretty girl. Here, he will sit up in bed in a mostly normal way, but he makes it interesting by keeping his head unnaturally vertical throughout. If he sat up in a regular way, it would not be at all funny. He begins this scene completely sober. Note how his head is straight and steady. His friend convinces him to try the healthy spring water at the spa. She doesn't know that the water has been spiked with alcohol. Charlie recognizes it immediately. His head starts to have a bigger range. Eventually, it gets quite wobbly and his hat has slipped back to a careless angle. In addition to the wobbly head, drunks have the hiccups. Watch how Charlie uses a sharp jerking of his head and tucking of his chin to deliver a very effective hiccup. After a night out, Charlie takes some pills, and he makes the simple action of swallowing pills into something special. That's the lesson. Take a normal action and do it in an unusual way. Here he is also drunk, but instead of his head being wobbly, he keeps it unusually stable. But he won't let the audience forget he's there. If you watch, he pops his head up slightly, and then keeps himself active with an ear cleaning. Then he turns his head to 90 degrees to a perfect profile and holds it steady while tipping his hat in a mechanical perfection. It's a different drunk performance adapted to get the most out of the scene. Moving on to the shoulders. In this scene, he has just read a note from his wife that she is leaving him because of his drinking. His shoulders start to shake, suggesting he is overcome with emotion. But when he turns back, he's mixing up a drink in the cocktail shaker, and it's the opposite of what he led us to believe. In another drink mixing shot, all his energy is unnaturally isolated in his shoulders, and the cocktail shaker hardly moves at all. In The Fireman, he meets a pretty woman and he drops his shoulders to look in her eyes, but then tightens them up when he gets overwhelmed by tender feelings. This was standard melodramatic acting, but he makes it funny by exaggerating and repeating it too many times. Here he is on a movie set, wearing an officer's uniform, and the epaulets emphasize his drooping shoulders. The shoulder shrugs suggest he's resigned to his fate on the battlefield. And again, it's the repetition and exaggeration that makes it funny. Of all his parts, Chaplin probably got the most mileage from his butt. In The Immigrant, his butt is the very first part of him we see. When disguising himself as a woman, he practices his female walk by throwing his butt from side to side. Somehow, Chaplin figured out that a suit of armor would emphasize his butt motion. Occasionally in a fight scenario, he would disrespect his opponent by aggressively throwing his butt towards him. In this scene, the other actor does all the work and Chaplin just provides the butt. In the short film The Fireman, he gets his butt kicked so many times it becomes normal. It's so normal he expects it to happen at any time. Instead of a foot hitting his butt can hit a foot. When beginning this dance, he falls on his butt and acts like it's broken. So he has to push it back into place. This is such a great dance scene, we will use it to transition to his feet. The tramp's famous walk is certainly Chaplin's most well-known behavior. However, Charlie played to the audience, so when the tramp walked away from the camera, he had a different walk. Often he would use his feet to just get a little something extra out of a scene. When preparing to play the violin, he has to strike a pose which involves jamming his heel into the ground. Watch here as he slides off the bench and throws a little switching up action in his legs just to make it unique. A bonk on the head will cause him to strike a cartoonishly rigid pose. But he keeps his feet moving because he wants to keep the audience's attention on him. In this scene, the sound of dice rolling will cause an uncontrollable reaction in Charlie's leg. It's a physical demonstration of his mental state. He can't resist getting into a dice game. Moving on to Charlie's hands, I could probably make a whole video around his comic uses for his hat and cane. Scratching himself was one of his signature moves. Many comedians have had their hands absent-mindedly do foolish things. Here, Charlie is helping out holding a baby, but he holds the bottle wrong. As he feels the liquid on his leg, he mistakenly believes it has been deposited there by the child. In a similar scene, he will carelessly drain a cup of water into his hat. This is a setup for later putting the hat on. He'll do it again, but note how he varies the timing so it's not the same as before and is a bit funnier for it. In one of my favorite shots, Charlie has suddenly recognized the beautiful girl he met earlier in the film, and he isn't paying attention to the beans on his knife. Charlie will also use his hands to mime. When sliding down a pole, he mimics a bird flying. And it's obvious this apple has a worm. In The Immigrant, he has to order from a menu he can't read, so he mimics playing a flute. What he is doing is ordering beans. You know, the musical fruit. Then he doubles down on the fart gag by blowing his nose. And we will close with what might be his most famous scene. He mimes a delicate dance, just using forks, rolls, his head, and hands. Thank you all for watching. I would love to read your comments. Please subscribe and visit comedyforanimators.com.